The Out of Bounds Show is brought to you by the Chandelier Brewery Takeover at Bulldog Burger in Ridgeland. Bulldog Burger, Ridgeland, Starkville, Tupelo. Great place to eat, celebrate college football and NFL. And Bulldog Burger, Lake Harbor in Ridgeland. Lake Harbor in Ridgeland. Right there by the reservoir, Bulldog Burger. Great sandwiches, burgers, appetizers. They have a really cool bar area. And we're going to do a Wilderness Trail bourbon tasting there when the weather breaks. So probably another month or so. We talked to that crew last week or the week before. I'm looking forward to that. Bulldog Burger, Lake Harbor, and Bridgeland. We welcome in Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone ESPN. Steve joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. And Mississippi State will host Arizona this weekend. They played at Arizona last year, and it was a late game. And it was kind of a wild game. You know, Mississippi State took control of the game and then got really, really sloppy. And somewhat allowed Arizona back in the game, but they won it, and they went home with the W, and now they'll host Arizona Saturday night at 6:30. Steve, I think everybody, I say everybody, you and I know, and a lot of people know that Jaden DeLora can play. Mississippi State is better. However, Arizona's got some pieces. What are you looking for? I mean, like, what's the first thing that you're looking for Saturday night with this matchup?
Well, I want to see State strike first. You know, last year, State won the ball game 39-17. Arizona goes out and scores on the first drive. They have a long running play. You know, State didn't fit a gap. Next thing you know, the crowd's kind of into it a little bit. State is a better team than Arizona, but Arizona is improved over last year. They worked the portal very hard. Yeah. They have, 3 Power 5 transfers on the defensive line. So it's going to be a much different team than State saw last year on the defensive side of the football. Kind of positive and negative because Arizona lost both of those good cornerbacks. So perhaps there's some plays to be made there offensively in the passing game for Will Rogers. But this Arizona team, and I discussed this yesterday with Matt Brock, they have SEC caliber skill on offense. And so this is a nice test for State. It is a game that I expect to be competitive, but ultimately Mississippi State to win.
Boy, you can't drop this game. Arnett, this early in your tenure, you got to take care of business. And with the brutal 3-game stretch coming up of LSU at South Carolina and Bama at home, 2 of those top 5 recruiters, you got to have this one. I said that about 30 minutes ago, Steve. I don't think enough emphasis can be put on the fact that they need to start playing really well and get out in front of Arizona early. And however that happens, defense or offense, I'm still wondering how long it's going to take. And I think it's okay. I've said throughout the offseason, still don't expect this offense to be some kind of, seamless, well-oiled machine. But I do wonder what kind of jump they can make from week 1 to week 2.
Yeah, that's interesting too. State put up a bunch of numbers last week, and I still think people look back at that first quarter and you say, man, expected a little more fireworks here early. That's probably a little bit unrealistic. Brand new scheme first quarter, and it's like we're picking apart a 41-point victory. You know what I'm saying? It's like you look at that and say, okay, you had some teachable moments, but you took care of business. You got out of there healthy. You get on to the next one. But I think State's play calling last week was really vanilla. And it's so funny. People would say, well, how was it vanilla? I saw these new formations. If you've been in practice at all, there's a lot more exotic nature to this thing with Barbet. But, you go up there and you pile up 300 yards rushing. You're never going to complain about that. But a lot of that, too, was just kind of athletes being athletes. There wasn't a lot of that schematic stuff that you look at and say, that's part of the deal. So,
okay, let's stay on offense. Mike Wright, dude's got a little speed. He's got some jets on him, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. You can ask Florida and Kentucky about that too, because that's exactly how he beat them last year at Vanderbilt with a lot less offensive skill around him. The thing about that is, and we've talked about on your show before, Will is decidedly the better passer between the two.
Sure.
And decidedly the better runner, and so, Will's probably got to run it just a little bit, just to kind of keep people honest, and Wright's got to throw it some, and, Wright's probably a better passer than Will is a runner, and that's just kind of the reality of it. But Will is far and away the better passer. I've seen Mike in practice several days, and he's a competitor, but he's really more in the intermediate passing game. Like he's not a guy that's going to stretch the field, and he can't make some of the throws consistently that Will has. And I've seen, people see a couple big plays and say, oh, well, Wright should be starting over Will. No, he absolutely should not. He hadn't even thrown a pass in the game yet in a Mississippi State uniform. I like the way Barbay is using these guys. And I want to say this to Mississippi State fans. If they don't hear anything else I say today, listen to this. It is okay to like both players.
Sure. I do.
Be a competition. Both of these guys are wearing maroon and white. Both of these guys made big plays to help Mississippi State win last week. It doesn't have to be an either-or deal, nor should it be.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. I did think that there would be a few more explosive plays. Well, how about this? I mean, I know Mike Wright could ball and run, yeah. And Creed Whitmore, I mean, impressed. But I thought Tulu and Justin Robinson and some other guys would shake loose. Did you? Did we lose Steve? He didn't like that question. All right, that's okay. The Out of Bounds Show is brought to you by Bulldog Burger in Ridgeland, Bulldog Burger in Starkville, and Bulldog Burger in Tupelo. We are the Out of Bounds Show. Don't forget to hit Apple Podcast, Spotify, search Out of Bounds with Bo Bounds. We're visiting with Steve Robertson. Genespage.com, 247 Sports, the Boneyard Podcast. Steve joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Steve, were you surprised some of the veterans like Tulu and Justin Robinson didn't have a big day or last week, or you just chalk it up to game one and it is what it is and moving on to Arizona?
Well, neither one of those guys is 100% either. You don't want to stress them too much. Tulu got a little nicked up in the game too, but, Justin was a guy that was kind of questionable, and, mentally he wanted to be out there, and I think ideally, you probably would have thought if it wasn't a season opener, I mean, this is game 6, you probably sit Justin for that game, and so they weren't quite 100%. They're a little bit closer to that this week. But, I didn't expect either one of them to go out and really dominate the game. And Xavier Thomas is back this week, and he did sit last week. And so you should see the full complement of the offense this week. But, against an FCS team, more times than not, as well as I do, you're just going to be careful with everybody. The main objective is to win the game, get some reps for some younger guys, and get out there healthy, and State was able to do that.
What about Xavier? Somebody stepped on his stitches. Is he really healthy, or is he just coming back, Steve?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of both. He's not going to quite be 100%, but he's good to go. What happened? He got gashed and just one of those football-related injuries, man. Just one crazy thing in practice. He got stepped on and got gashed open, put some stitches in, came back a little bit too early. The stitches got pulled, so they had to kind of go back and fix that. And he could have played last week, but it was like there's really no point in it, right? Let's give him another week to heal. And so yeah, he's good to go, and he's raring to get on that field. And that's a punt returner right there, man. There's a lot of people out there that want to run around. But that's a guy that sees the field well, knows how to set up blocks. He's a weapon in the punt game.
Who impressed you on the offensive line?
I'm gonna go a little deeper than most people would. I thought Percy Lewis and Leon Bell played really well, and neither one of them started in the game. But I think things kind of settled a little bit with those two big bookend tackles. And granted, Southeastern doesn't have a tremendous pass rush, right? So you'll see a little more of that this week. They've got a defensive end at Arizona that's very rangy and explosive defensive end. So that'll be interesting to see. But there's some depth within this group, and it's going to be I'm eager to see how they move people around, because Arizona's got a massive defensive tackle that transferred in from Georgia. He's just a space eater, though. He doesn't move real well. He's not a guy that's going to penetrate and push into the backfield. He just kind of eats up space. and opens up things for other people, kind of clogs up the middle, kind of that traditional 3-tech and nose tackle from years ago. But I'm eager to see how that interior line kind of attacks them. But I think tackle-wise, Le'Veon Bell at his first action as Bulldog I thought was really good, which bodes well for the future. But I probably feel better about the depth of this offensive line than I have in a few years.
Okay. All right. Well, so, you were talking about Arizona. Jed Fish is an interesting guy. Spent a lot of time in the NFL. He's been under Belichick and McVay, among others. And he has hit the portal hard the last couple of years. Where do you think their roster, now that he has hit the portal so hard for 2 years in a row, and don't you agree that Jaden DeLaura can ball?
Oh, I think he's a stud. I mean, Jaden's a Mike Leach guy, right? I mean, it's like
Washington for 2 years, right? State, excuse me.
Yeah. What's crazy about it too, like his release is ridiculous. I mean, like you see a lot of people that throw the ball far and throw it hard, but DeLaura can get the ball up and out as quick as anybody in the country. Now, sometimes he forces the action, which has kind of been the criticism of him. State had 3 picks against him last year, and a couple of them were just him trying to do too much.
Right.
But when he plays within the framework of Fisher's game plan, this guy can really be good. And they've got great receivers outside. I think McMillan's a guy that is probably an unheralded player, and of course Cowling's a guy that they were really fired up about last year. So they have some guys on the outside that can hurt you, and they've got a quarterback that, number one, works the perimeter and gets the ball out quickly, so it negates a lot of the pass rush. So you've got to do some things in coverage on those underneath routes to make him hold on to the football a little bit longer. And State got to him some last year, but he's going to be one of the more mobile quarterbacks you see, and I don't mean that in a Jaden Daniels way where he'll just tuck it and go run 70 yards. This is a guy that knows how to buy time and extend plays, and you can't cover forever, so that makes him even more dangerous.
Are you expecting I would not be surprised if this game is close throughout the second half. How do you see it?
Oh, I see it the same way. I think State ultimately covers, but it's probably like, that nail in the coffin drive with, 6-7 minutes to go in the game. I think State wins the game. I think State covers, but I've seen some scores from some of our fans out there, and a lot of that you just kind of write up to irrational exuberance, right? I mean, when you look at this Arizona team and you look at what they return, and Jed Fish is a guy too, as you mentioned, that has a pedigree unlike a lot of coaches in college. They do some things, Bo, with that screen game. It's pretty amazing.
They really do.
It really is. And like they'll line up in some exotic and wild formations. You think, what the heck's going on here? Next thing you know, they're screening behind the play, and they got 5 blockers out there in front, and they have numbers, and so they disguise some things really well. So this chess match between Arnett, Brock, and Fish and his staff is going to be awfully interesting. But, yeah, I think ultimately State has the better athlete. State's playing at home. State's a better team.
Yeah.
I think without State's help, Arizona's probably, I don't know, maybe loses by a couple possessions, maybe a 10-point type game. So.
I can't emphasize how big a game this is for Arnett. It just you can't afford to drop this one. Don't you agree, Steve?
No, I agree. Now, everybody all year long has said State's going to win all 4 non-conference games. And then I think a lot of people look at that Southern Miss game just because they said, hey, this is the week before the Egg Bowl. It's been a long season. Southern Miss will come out playing like it's a Super Bowl. So, yeah, that's clearly an issue. But I think a lot of people have kind of looked over this Arizona game, just kind of assuming the fact that, we went up there and beat them last year pretty handily. And we did. But the reality of it is this is a team that has improved. State has also improved. But to think that Arizona's just going to get on a plane and come over here and, just go enjoy some Bulldog burger and call it a day, you're kidding yourself.
Fish went to Florida. And for our listeners, Steve and I were talking about Jed Fish, the head coach for the Arizona Wildcats. He was there last year. Last year was his first year, as Steve said, and we've talked about. He went portal heavy from the jump. Big-time NFL pedigree, been under Belichick, McVay, been with the Broncos, the Jaguars, and so on. They almost had it going at UCLA when he was there, but that's been an S show for a long time. and that was several years ago. But if you read up on him, he attended the University of Florida because Steve Spurrier was the coach there. And the sole reason was to hopefully work for Spurrier one day. And
what's interesting about that too, Bo, is he was a GA under Spurrier in '99 and 2000, and was on the staff that lost in Davis Wade Stadium in 2000.
2000 when DeCenzo and Dante ran all day. Okay.
Yeah, that's the famous 3rd and 57 game. Yeah.
Wow.
He was part of that staff. And then, if you remember, I always think about this. I'll say this to people all the time, and they don't believe you until you show them the data. The Louisiana high school quarterback is one of the most overrated players in the country every single year. There's always this guy that comes up as a sophomore, and everybody's like, oh, this guy's going to be a dude, right? And the guy that was one of those guys on that team, you remember Brock Berlin?
Yes.
It was supposed to be, and all the LSU people lost their mind, and lo and behold, he ends up going to Florida. Didn't pan out there. I think he ended up in Miami. I can go all the way back to Josh Booty. I mean, there's always some guy out there that everybody latches on too early, and they say, this kid's going to be the next big thing. I don't know that happens in Mississippi and Alabama. I think by and large, when we have a in-state quarterback prospect, they end up being pretty good. But there's a lot of these guys that get so overhyped in Louisiana. And I think a lot of it's because there's just so many periodicals over there that cover high school sports. But there's always the next big thing, and then those guys turn out to not be the next big thing. And so that year, the next big thing from Louisiana played at Florida for Spurrier and was the third quarterback in that ball game that did nothing.
Okay, that's a good point, man. Blade, Galladay, Dorsett. Who was the other dude? Sluter or something from Pensacola area or something? The Panhandle. Kevin Sluter.
I think he may have been gone by then.
He may have, 99 may have been his last year. You could have been right when they went 10-2 and went over there and beat Clemson in the Peach Bowl. Steve Robertson on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line. We are the Out of Bounds Show. 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. Steve, with the 6:30 kick on Saturday, it gives them an opportunity to sometimes host more high school players just because they'll play on Friday and they can kind of sleep in. Are you expecting I know LSU's the next weekend, but then you look at time. Are you expecting a pretty good turnout Saturday?
Yeah, it'll be better than last week. And you didn't have a lot of dudes here other than your commitments. There were a handful of guys here. Ole Miss commitment, Noriel White was there, and a lot of local guys. But it'll be a better crowd this week. And you mentioned, those kids making an incredible commitment. To be honest with you, especially as out-of-state kids, they go out there and get beat up on Friday night, and then get up and get in a car, and they got to be here for an 11 a.m. game, which means you got to check in more times than not, like 9 o'clock. You got to come in there, and so more times than not, these guys, they leave and drive and get a hotel room somewhere a couple hours out of Starkville, and there's quite the commitment to get there. And that's why I've always said to you, anybody that shows up for an 11 a.m. game is really serious about your program, because there's just such a time crunch in order for those guys to get there. And can you imagine going out and playing a high school football game on Friday night and going a couple of overtimes, and you got to go sit in the car for a handful of hours to watch a college football game and sit on aluminum bleachers? I mean, come on.
Okay, let's go to the defensive side of the football. You mentioned Jaden DeLora is going to really, really test people on the edge and underneath, which that's going to be a lot. And I think State's still trying to find a Tyrus Wheat type guy. But I also want to ask is, what you see. I know Tyrus would come off the edge too, but he would also be an underneath guy and play all around like Arnett likes to do. Who do you see that could emerge as a Tyrus Wheat type guy? And also separately, who could emerge as somebody really good off the edge this year?
Well, I think both of those guys could be John Lewis, and he didn't win the starting job. But I thought Deshaun Page was very inconsistent last week, and maybe he's playing out of position. We'll see. But I think with DeLora this week, you got to keep him in the pocket, right? I mean, you don't want him getting out playing backyard football, right? And so I think in some respects, you really work hard on the edge, and maybe I don't know if you play a 5 or a 7 tack, but I think you want to create the pocket and then collapse the pocket. You know what I'm saying? You don't want him kind of dictating terms. You want him playing within the framework of the line of scrimmage you establish. And so that'll be interesting. But, I think DeMonte had a really good game last week. He didn't do a lot of it in the backfield, though. And DeMonte had a really good game for State last week.
Let me ask you this on him. Look, more power to the kid. He stayed the course from Provine, been there a while, had to wait his turn, had some injury, all that. He's grinded like so many of these guys do in Starkville and Oxford and everywhere else. Is he quick enough? Has he got a quick enough first step, Steve?
I think he does. I think one of the things, people forget, they were in that car accident, that
right.
That nearly killed one of their friends, and then he had the red shirt the next year, and he actually still has another year of eligibility remaining if he chooses to use it. But I think he's a guy, too, that had to learn to play at a new weight, because as soon as he got here and got in the strength and conditioning program, he really began to put on some mass. And I think it's taken him some time to kind of get adjusted to that, a new playing weight. And I think this is really the first time I think that we've seen him realize his potential. He's shown some flashes at times, but he's off to a good start this year, and we'll see. But is he that explosive pass rusher off the edge? I think that's the real question mark, isn't it? I mean, he's really good against the run. He's a guy that's very strong and has a lot of contact courage, but can he be a difference maker in the pass rush? I think that's the question that needs to be answered this year.
Man, I know we keep harping on it, but how bad do they need John Lewis to step up and be that guy, Steve?
And that's one of those things too with John. I mean, he has, number one, he's a great teammate. I mean, like when you're around the other guys, that's the thing they'll tell you, is that he's a guy that really plays hard. And the fact that he's out there, he nearly blocked 2 punts last week. He got one. He nearly got the one before that one. I mean, I think that kind of said, okay, well, I can get the next one. It's just something they saw on film, or perhaps, John just kind of realized that how the technique this guy was trying to use to shield him, and he just overpowered him.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still a big recruiting win for State, but I think John Lewis's best days are ahead of him, and it could be this year. And I think we need John Lewis to take that next step. But from an effort standpoint, he's there. I mean, it's just a matter of maybe getting in some game reps. But, we talked about the beginning of the year, Tyrus Sweet and Emmanuel Forbes, losing both of those guys, those are significant losses.
Yeah.
And I would venture to say from an individual skill set standpoint, it's bigger than anything you lost at safety, even though you basically lost the entire first-team safety group. I think a lot of those guys are a little easier to replace than a guy like Tyrus Sweet and certainly Emmanuel Forbes.
I've got a minute. Were you surprised that you didn't see Travion earlier than you did, Travion Williams?
He played a lot, though. I didn't go back and look at the drive chart, but he played kind of comparable starter snaps, and that kid's a load, man.
I know. I was watching him in the third quarter, I guess, but well, anyway, I know they wanted to rep out Pickering and Crumedy and everybody else. That's another one that when you win, this because you live it way more than I do. When you win the recruiting battles of John Lewis and Travion Williams, you got to get the juice out of them, And
yeah,
so we'll see. Steve, hey, man, appreciate it. Thanks, man. Genespage.com, that thing's on fire. I mean, it's football season. So 247 Sports, the Boneyard Podcast. Steve joined us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Bundle your car and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. Go local, go with the home team, as Jake Mangum likes to tell us. Favorites.com to get a quote in 4 minutes or less. Lunch today is brought to you by Fleetway Market and the Market Cafe and their daily smoked meats, pulled pork, ribs, blue plates. Fleetway Market, Market Cafe in Gluckstadt. Good morning. Welcome in. NFL tomorrow. Guess I'm going to have to win fantasy. Start off 1-0, baby.